All right. So we're actually talking about the parts of the speech today, and then we will have some homework because, man, the LADS convention is only like a month and a half away. So, good grief, we got to get going. All right, so the book wants you to learn the difference between a speech to inform and a speech to persuade. A speech to inform. Information. Little information. To inform means to tell somebody something. Just give them facts. I can inform you about the color of these chairs. They're red, okay, and blue. All right, so you just inform somebody means you're just telling them something, okay? To persuade them means you want to convince them to believe something, okay? So I'm going to tell you the facts about a cheetah, okay? That's informing you. But if I want to persuade you that a cheetah is the best animal out there, that's going to be different than giving you facts. Okay? I'm going to make points and tell you why you should believe that also. Okay? So, in a speech... Sorry. Okay, in a speech about the Bible where you're going to inform somebody, for example, you could inform them that... Hey, Evie. No, ma'am. You could inform them that Joshua was brave and these are the people Joshua defeated. Okay? So that's you're just giving them some facts about Joshua. Okay? But to persuade them, you might want them to believe they should be brave like Joshua. That's not giving them information. That's telling them something they should do, and now it's your job to convince them that they should do it. So you're going to have to give them some points and some good illustrations and be persuasive. All right? So, according to Aristotle. Do you know who Aristotle is? Anybody? Who's a really old guy. So old that he's not here anymore. Okay? Aristotle is old guy. Okay? But he was a philosopher, considered one of the smartest people who ever lived.
How old was he?
Oh, I don't know how old he was when he died. But I mean, he was hundreds of years, thousands of years ago. Okay?
What's on your fingers?
Was it my fingers? His blood. No, it's paint. Okay, so listen. According to Aristotle, there are 3 parts of persuasion, of convincing somebody of something. The first one is good character. The second is an appeal to logic. We're going to go through these, don't worry. And the other is an appeal to emotion. All right, so good character. And he called that ethos. So your character. Why is it important to have a good character? Well, for your speech, that means who you are and how you live. So if I'm up here and I'm like, you know what? Let me tell you something. You should not drink Dr. Pepper. As I'm taking a sip of Dr. Pepper, why does that not work? To be persuasive, to convince you shouldn't drink Dr. Pepper.
You shouldn't eat it.
Davis?
Because it'll if you're drinking it, then that will tell them that that it's not true that you could not actually drink Dr. Pepper.
Very good. So what I'm saying doesn't match what I'm doing, does it? Okay? So you want to practice what you preach. That's what we say. Practice what you preach. That means do what you're telling other people to do. So, shh, Evie, I'm going to make you have to go sit outside. So the importance of being the type of people. Now, do you have to be perfect before you can ever get up and talk to people about the fact that we should be good people? No, okay? But should you be trying to do what's right before you get up and tell everybody else they need to do what's right? Yes, okay? So good character is part of what it means to be persuasive, okay? An appeal to logic or reasoning. That's how you think and whether or not it makes sense, okay? So that's called logos, all right? Scriptural evidence is one way. That means, Luke? Yes, quickly. So scriptural evidence, that means looking at scriptures. That's one way that you show people something makes sense, especially if you're making a biblical point. If you're making a point about the Bible, you want to pull up some scriptures and say, these scriptures tell you why this makes sense, okay? Then there are logical arguments, is how the book puts it. I know these are a lot of big words. But what it means is being able to make to make a point that makes sense. Okay? And so if you were to say, So an argument and a point that you're making needs to have a flow of logic, how you think. It needs to have a good one. But it also needs to be what we call sound. Sound means it's actually true. And so that means all the parts of it are true. So if I say unicorns are white,
No.
and this is not a good one. This is not a good one.
They're not. They're not white.
Stop.
They're rainbow.
Okay, let's skip.
Brown.
Yes. The sky is brown. Brown is a color, therefore the sky is a color.
What do you mean?
That's actually a logical argument. Okay?
What do you mean?
But it's not sound because parts of it aren't true. The sky is not brown. Okay? So parts of it are and parts of it are not true, so it actually doesn't come to a good conclusion. All right? So you want to be able to make a good argument, make good points that make sense. Okay? All right? And then your appeal to emotion. What are emotions?
They are.
Weston?
Stuff you choose to do. They're
Evie,
unicorns.
you need to go sit outside the door on the ground. Now. Go now. Okay. They are like, Davis?
Emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I mean feelings.
Yes. Okay. So the reason that's important is because I can tell you a lot of facts about Joshua and the need to be brave. I can say you need to be brave, and Joshua was brave, and Moses was brave, and sometimes you're going to need to be brave. Those are some facts, and they may be true, and they may be logical, but they don't really motivate you to do something very much. But if I say, have you guys ever been afraid of something? Have you ever cried before? What's the saddest thing that's ever happened to you?
I don't know.
Weston?
Once I fell off my bike, and it was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was a scrape from here to here. There was blood, and on the other arm, blood going down everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Wait,
Davis?
serious?
No.
No.
Both of my dogs
Worse.
died.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And do we want God to help us when those difficult things happen? Do we want to be able to be brave?
Yeah.
So do we want to listen to what God says so that we can?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so see what we just did? We talked about something that made you feel either happy or sad. So then when I said, hey, do you want to have something that helps you when you feel that way? Well, of course you do. So then you're more likely to listen to what that is. Okay? So we want to make people feel something when we're trying to make an argument. Okay? Now, how do we do that? Well, a lot of times we do that with stories that we tell, like the ones you just told me. Okay, or with illustrations. Remember we talked about those, how you show how one thing is like another. Okay, so one illustration of being sad would be when your pets die. An illustration of being hurt is when you get scraped and you're bleeding. Okay, so that's something that shows what something is like. Okay, and then you can use humor sometimes to make people feel, but we should be careful with humor, especially as first-time speakers. I'll tell you why. Especially getting up. If you're going to get up and tell a funny story or joke right at the beginning, what happens if the crowd doesn't think it's funny? That speech doesn't start very well, does it? Right? So it is good to start with humor sometimes, but you got to be sure that people are going to laugh. Because if they don't, it's just really awkward. If you're like, tell the joke, ha, 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 and nobody laughs, and then you got to continue on with your speech knowing they're like, oh, this guy. Okay? So you want to be careful with jokes, make sure that they're good. One way to do that is to maybe tell it to somebody else. I've done that to Miss Sarah before. I've said, I'm going to tell this joke. So a lot of times it's when I'm worried about a joke. And she'll say, I wouldn't tell that joke. Or, yeah, I think that's funny. Okay? So sometimes you can ask somebody else. All right? Or then you don't get fired. All right. Now, basic parts of a speech. There's the intro. That's the introduction, the beginning. There's the body, which are the main points. And then there's the conclusion, which is the end. that sums it up. Now let's start with the body. The body. Research. So how do we make our points? How do we come up with our points for our lesson? We go to research. We look stuff up. It's like looking for clues and then writing them down as you find them, except you don't have a weird blue dog going boop, boop. Okay? All right? So the Bible is one of those. Okay, the Bible is obviously the place you're going to go when you're talking about the Bible. You can look for different passages, different scriptures about it. Okay, it right now is your topic of being strong and courageous, and whatever specific scripture or story in Joshua that you've chosen. Okay, you'll look at different passages about it. Okay, so you're going to want to look at the passage itself that you're talking about. Probably want to read that one, right? And then other passages around it. Like what was happening around this whole thing, right? Before it, after it, and then other passages in the Bible about being brave and courageous. You can also read different versions of the Bible, right? You've noticed sometimes she's supposed to be sitting outside the door. Okay, Mr. Drew's going to check on her. Okay, so look, different versions, all right? So you may have noticed sometimes, we read our different Bibles and you're like, this one says it a little bit differently. And it's not like it's telling you something different, but it just may say it a little differently, okay? So you can read different ones. It can help you understand. And then there's things called, you're probably not going to use these right now, but they're called commentaries. And that's where some guy has said, what I have to say about this passage is important enough to put in a book. And so they will write what passages mean and what scriptures mean, and they do a lot of research for you. So you don't have to go read a million books. They already did it, and they'll tell you the important things. Okay? And then there's articles, things people write about stuff online or print, which... Do we even do that? No, I'm just kidding. So the online, be careful online, right? Get advice from different people that you trust, because guess what? You can read absolutely anything on the internet. So you need to be careful what you type something in, and you'll find all kinds of ideas about stuff. Okay, so it's good. It's good to think about what different people have to say, but you also want to be careful. All right, and then give credit. What's credit mean? Not like a credit card. You're like, I'm going to give him credit for this. That means making sure that the people who came up with something, we tell people that it was them. Okay, so let's say I find a story online that is a good illustration for being brave. Okay, and it's this guy who tells this story about his dog and how he had to go looking for it and how he found it, and so then I'm like, hey, that's a good story. I'm going to tell that story, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it like it was me. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bad. All right. Can you tell that story and say Peyton told this story about his dog, and then tell it and use it as an illustration? So long as if it was Peyton's story, you say it was Peyton's. Yeah, that's fine. Now, do you have to tell people every single thing you read, who said it? So you read something that somebody's writing about Joshua, and it says Joshua was brave, and you say, do you have to, and it was Peyton's book, do you have to say, Peyton said Joshua was brave? No, right? That's not like an original thought, okay? That's something that's just kind of normal. It's not like something that you really need to give Peyton credit for, okay?
And they're like, why did you not give me credit?
All right, so if it's something that, here's how I decide whether I'm going to give somebody credit for something that's like one sentence. If it's a big, long story, okay. But if it's like a sentence or two sentences, and I'm like, should I give somebody credit? I read it somewhere, and I'm going to say it exactly like that. No. I think, is somebody going to hear me say that sentence and go, ooh, I need to write this in my special journal because I want to remember that special sentence. If I think people might think that about it, I'll give credit. Okay? Because that means it was special enough to whoever wrote it that I ought to say that they said it, okay? All right. Now, what's your goal? You need to ask that question. Am I trying to inform them or persuade them? You need to know that for your speech, okay? You need to know, am I just going to tell them a bunch of stuff about Joshua, or am I going to try to convince them to do something? Okay? It could be one or the other for this topic. You could just say, okay, well, this one I'm actually just going to tell them what happened in the Joshua story. Let's say it's Jericho. I'm just going to tell them what happened in the Jericho story, and I'm going to tell them how Joshua was brave and how God was with him. Okay? You're not trying to convince them to believe or do something. All right? But if you're going to go on at the end of that lesson and say, now let me tell you why you also need to do that, then you got a little bit of persuading going on, okay? Which I think most good lessons, if not all, end up having to be persuaded. Because if I don't walk away from the lesson going, I need to do something about that, then it probably wasn't all that helpful. Unless it was just a lesson where we're like, hey, we need you to tell us who all the kings of Israel were. Let's do a class on that, okay? It might not be something where I'm going to say, okay, now you need to go away and do this. I might just tell you they are, okay? But most likely, you're going to want to do something we call a call to action. You want them to do something about it. Go pray more if it's a sermon on praying. Go help the poor if it's a sermon on helping the poor. Okay? If it's like Mr. Stan's lesson this morning about talking to the people about Jesus, that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to persuade you that it's important to talk to people about Jesus. Okay? All right. So, how do you motivate people? Right? I tell you, you know what? You need to be brave like Joshua. But how do I make you really want to do it? Okay, so here's some tools. So here's one basic level is physical safety. That means your body, right? So if I'm like, if you don't listen to me right now, you're going to get sick. Okay, well that makes people think. All right, they're like, ooh, I'm not going to be safe if I don't do this. Okay? That's one thing that motivates people. Now, I'm not telling you to just take that and go, okay, I'm going to use physical safety every time. I'm going to find a way to tell people they are in danger if they don't do what I say. I'm saying these are different ways that sometimes happen, okay? Now, sometimes you use. Another one is social safety. Social is like being around people and hanging out and stuff. And if people think that they're not going to be able to be with their friends, or people aren't going to like them anymore if they don't do this, sometimes that really gets people moving, okay? Another one is social acceptance. Not just the safety, but being accepted, people liking you. If they think, oh, if I don't do this, people aren't going to like me, okay? That motivates people, all right? Or being a part of a group. Like, let's say you want to be in a certain group at school of kids, and you think, oh, if I don't do this, I can't be a part of that group. They don't want to hang out with me. That usually motivates people, okay? And another thing is feeling important. People like to feel important. You like to feel important? Yeah, I like to feel important, okay? So those are things that a lot of times make people feel important, or make people. Being important is something that motivates people, okay? So I'm going through this stuff the book really wants you guys to learn. You'll use some of it and not some of it for this speech. Okay. How do you organize? How do you put stuff together in your speech? You've got a lot of ideas in your head. Now, how do we put it in order?
Together.
What?
You can put 2 verses or 3 or 4 or 5 or
you can.
Together.
You can put verses together. But what order do you put them in?
20.
That's not an order. Okay, so that's a good thought, though. You can string verses together. Okay, so there are several different orders you could do. One is called a causal order. It's like a cause. What caused that? What caused that? Okay, and what that is where your speech shows them there's a problem because of something that happened. Specific conditions. Something happened and it caused a problem. And you're going to show what the cause was, and so you can get rid of it. All right, so you're giving a speech about some leak that happened, and you're like, you know what? It's because somebody poked a hole in the boat. Now, here's how we can keep from poking holes in the boat. Okay? That's a causal order. You start off by showing there's a problem, which is water in the boat, and the cause is poking holes in the boat. And then the rest of the speech is about how we can get rid of poking holes in the boat. Okay? All right. Now, the reasons order. Listen, here's a reasons order. A reasons order is where you list reasons why they should do something. And you need evidence for that. Evidence is things that prove something, right? If I say, Peyton likes sweatshirts. Here's the evidence. He's wearing one. Okay? Evidence helps to prove the point that you made. Okay? Now, a reasons order is pretty easy. You're just listing reasons. Okay? You say, you should stop poking holes in the boat. Here are the reasons. Number 1, we're all going to die. Number 2, see point number 1. Okay? All right. Here's the problem-solution order. Okay? The problem-solution order is kind of like the causal order, but you're not going to focus on what caused it. You're just going to say, here's the problem, and here's how we can get better. Okay? This is how you can fix the problem. Okay? So it may not be focused on the cause, like how can we stop poking holes in the boat. It may be how can we plug the hole in the boat. That's the solution to the problem. It doesn't focus on how to stop it again. It focuses on how to fix it. Okay?
You just randomly have a giant bucket of Gorilla Glue and you just pour it on top of it. But it would go right.
Okay. All right. Think about reasons for the audience to believe you or change their mind. Okay? So ask yourself the question, why should they believe me? Why would they change their mind? Okay? And then give them reasons. Give them evidence. Okay, here's really important, guys. Listen. Don't insult. Peyton?
Peyton.
Or Weston, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Baker.
Actually, I'm used to that. Baker. I'm used to that.
Go ahead.
Our grandparents' boat, it overflowed. It actually went inside the boat.
Well, you need to give them a speech about it.
No.
Okay, listen. Don't insult. That means make fun of people. And listen, this is really important when you're trying to persuade somebody, because a lot of times there's somebody else who disagrees with you. Okay? And that means, so if you're trying to teach somebody that, let's say they should be baptized, and you're doing a speech about that, there are some people who don't think you need to be baptized. Okay? So here, hey, listen, Weston. So what can be really easy to do is just get up there and talk about all the reasons those people are wrong. But you know what would be better? Just get up there and give reasons why you should be baptized. Talk about the topic and not other people, because you don't have to do that. Okay? Sometimes it might be necessary to mention somebody else, but if it's possible to just talk about what you should do instead of who you shouldn't be like, then do that. Okay? Don't insult other people. This can be especially important if you're doing debate. None of you are doing debate, but if you go on to do debate at Last of Leaders, you're actually going to be debating another person and who disagrees with you. And it can be really easy to get up there and just talk about that other person and make them look bad. And that's really, really bad, okay? Because you're not running for president, so don't do that. All right. Number of points. How many points should you have? What's the right number of points to have in a speech?
The amount you need to convince people.
Oh my, very good. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
The amount of points it takes to convince them. If I can convince you in 1 point, that's great. Unless you're like a professional preacher and they expect you to be between 20 and 25 minutes, then you've got to go a little longer than that. But the crowd will love you, okay? All right. Depends on your time and your purpose. You have a specific time limit for your Last of Leaders speech. Okay, I've given that to you already, and we can go look again. All right, but for a 4-minute speech, 1 or 2 is probably fine. Okay, 1 or 2 is probably fine. For impromptu, which we'll talk about in a second, that means like on the spot. You didn't even get to prepare for the speech, but like 2 minutes. Okay, then probably just 1 real good point. Okay, maybe 2, but probably just 1.
You poke a hole in the boat with the jacket.
No, you don't poke any holes in the boat with any jackets. Okay, listen. All right, so let's talk about your introduction. Well, I'm going to give y'all some homework that's going to help you walk through this stuff, okay? Now, here's your introduction. So, the purpose of the opening... Liam, listen to me. Listen to me. Shh. The purpose of your opening is to grab the audience's attention, because the audience is a lot like y'all right now, not paying attention to me. Okay? So you want to do something that gets their attention. Now, do you want to do something so dramatic that everybody freaks out?
No.
No, not necessary. I knew somebody who started a youth devo by pulling out a fake gun. And that's really dumb.
Wait, they
Okay?
really did?
Yes, he did. Like, he was like, his point was, what if I was going to hold a gun to you and tell you to deny Jesus and say you don't believe in him? Would you do it? But that's a really silly thing to do, because you don't pull out a fake gun on people. That's just not smart. Okay? So, you don't have to be so dramatic. You can get people's attention with a thought-provoking question, a question that makes them really think, or a story,
Definitely not a gun.
okay, or an illustration. Okay, something that really gets their attention. And remember, we talked about things that motivate, like physical safety. So if you said, let me tell you something that will help you be safe, or you guys are in danger and you may not even know it. Okay, so that's physical safety. Okay, I'm going to ask a question about, what's your greatest fear? Okay, that could be a way you start. We're talking about Joshua and being brave. Okay, so there you can ask questions, you can use stories. Let me tell you about a time where I was scared to death. Okay, and then tell the story. All right? Find a sentence to open it up with that grabs people. Again, be careful with humor, especially in your introduction, because it might not be as funny as you think it is, and then your rest of your speech will be real tough for you. Okay, and it needs to be connected to your speech. Okay, you're giving a speech on Joshua and be brave, and you're like, oh, I've got to find a good intro that gets people's attention. Oh, I remember one time I made this hamburger that was really good. They'll like to hear about that, but it doesn't have anything to do with your speech. Maybe it would get their attention, but it doesn't have anything to do with your speech.
I'm actually in the mood for I already am.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, but so, yeah, talking about food during a sermon, like on Sunday morning, is usually not a good idea. Okay, because then people are just thinking about food. Okay, so listen, you're going to think about something that will connect to your speech, okay? How long should your intro be?
About not even, sometimes about like 45 seconds.
Could be. Could
Say
be.
30.
It depends on the length of your lesson. All right? You shouldn't have a 3-minute introduction for a 5-minute speech, because that's most of your speech. All right?
Then you have a 2-minute conclusion.
Yeah. And no body.
That would be the whole thing.
That wouldn't be good. Okay? We'll come back to how to do a conclusion later. That's not going to be how you start your lesson. Okay? You're going to start probably working on the body and then come back to the intro. All right. Your conclusion, keep it short. Don't say, in conclusion, as we finish up here, and then go 10 more minutes. Okay? People do not like that at all. All right? If you say, we're about to finish up, you better finish up, buddy. All right? Okay. You or Stan will not ask you to do it again. All right. Keep it brief. Keep it brief. Okay, that means short. You can, but don't have to say in conclusion. All right, when you get to your conclusion, can you say in conclusion and then tell your conclusion? Can you say that? You can. Do you have to say that?
No.
No, you do not. Okay? Different types of conclusions. The author says one of them is to refer back to your introduction. So it's something like, and as I said in the beginning, we need to be brave like Joshua. Okay? So you could go back, or
What we do in school is whenever we're writing paragraphs, we have to make the conclusions has to be connected to our intro somehow.
Yep. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Hey, guys, I'm going to make you put seats in between you if you don't stop. Another way to do it is just to really put emphasis on one of your points. So I want you to remember what I said in point number 2. Don't poke holes in the boat. Okay, whatever. All right. All right. Or the third one can be restate your main points. So in conclusion, remember the 3 points. Don't poke holes in the boat. Don't poke holes in the boat. Don't poke holes in the boat. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? So there are different ways you can do it, all right? And those are not the only thing that you can do, okay? But those are 3 different ways that the author gives, and it's good to kind of start out with some basic stuff, all right? Okay, what's your process? What should your process be? Well, process means the order that you do stuff in, okay? You start with research. In other words, thinking up all the things you want to say. What scriptures do I want to use? What stories do I want to tell? Okay, and you gather all that stuff up. Then you're going to outline. That means you're not going to write out every single word. You're just going to write out main points. Story about Weston falling down. Don't poke holes in the boat. This scripture. Okay, you're just writing basic ideas down. Okay, and then you're going to do what we call a draft. It's wind coming in. No, a draft. Okay, and that's where you write it out for the first time, but you don't worry about it being perfect, because you're going to come back and make it perfect. You just need to get it down on paper, okay? So then you're going to take your main points and you're going to put them in order on a paper and you're going to write it out word for word or close to it, okay? And then you're going to let it sit there. You're going to let it stew and slow roast for a little while. You're going to and then you're going to come back to it and read it and go, oh, that doesn't sound nearly as good as I thought it did at 2 a.m., okay? And you're going to redo part of that. All right, and then you're going to adjust it. And you're going to practice, and you're going to try to memorize a lot of it. Going to try to memorize a lot of it. At least memorize a lot of your beginning and ending, okay?
This is what you need to memorize. From 2 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Yeah. What's the reason for at least wanting to memorize a lot of the intro?
So you don't have to. So you can make them know that. You can let the audience know that you know what you're doing.
Yes. You look a lot more like you know what you're doing, that you can get their attention and connect with them with eye contact if you don't have to be looking at your paper. Okay? And with your conclusion, the same thing, because a conclusion, you want to bring everything together and really end it on a good note, right? But what doesn't end it on a good note is, and so in conclusion, these 3 points. Let me read it here for you. That's not a good way to bring it home. Okay? All right. So if you're going to do a script, and we'll come back to this when we actually get to writing all this stuff out, because you don't need to worry about fonts and bolding and highlighting right now. Okay? But essentially, they wanted double spaces. Double space on your computer font. We'll come back to that. But when you do write it out on your paper, one thing that you can do so that you know this for now, this is an outline. This is not written all out, okay? But if you're like, oh, I don't want to forget this part right here, take a highlighter and highlight it so you don't forget it. So you can actually see it there and you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to forget that. If there's a word you need to know how to pronounce, like it's a long name or something in the Bible, it's hard to know how to say it, you can write out how to say it right here on the side of your paper so you don't forget. There's no reason not to do that. Don't think, oh, well, it feels like cheating. I just need to... Well, so what? Nobody's going to look at your paper, okay? Only you need to know that. Okay. All right. So, you can write out pronunciations, make notes on the side. You can even make notes of like, oh, slow down at this part. Or make sure to make eye contact at this part. Or, do a little dance at this part. No, don't do that. Okay. Pay attention. Hey, sit up. Luke Xander, sit up. No more. Okay? All right. For a speech to inform them, just to tell them stuff, it's a little different to organize. There's some different ways you can. One is called chronological, which means in order. It's like time. Like here's how Joshua defeated the Canaanites, and he didn't. And here's how Joshua and the people started taking over the promised land. This took place, then this took place, then this happened, then this happened. Okay, it's like a timeline order. Another is like a order of how things took place in like steps. It's not necessarily this happened at this time and this happened at this time. It's a lot of times in a how-to speech. How to not poke holes in a boat. Okay? The first step is don't do it. The second step is don't let other people do it. Okay? Like just if you're going to build something, okay, the first step is to draw it out. The second step is go buy stuff. Third step is to, okay, it's like in steps. The last one is reason order, like reasons or causes of something, like a heart attack or poking holes in a boat. Okay, like reasons why someone would poke a hole in a boat. they need help. Okay, all right. Now, for the impromptu, do we have anybody doing impromptu speech? You'd only do that if you got the winner's round, right? Winner's circle. Okay. An impromptu speech, the basic definition is speaking with very little advanced preparation. You did not get to prepare a lot, okay? The impromptu requirements are grades 10 through 12, so none of you are going to do it, okay? So I'm just going to skip through that because you don't need those till much later. All right, the process. But I do have some people listening who are grades 10 through 12 I'm recording for. Do you?
I don't think any of them are winner circle speech.
Okay, all right. Well, if you need that and you have the notes and you're listening to me right now out there in outer space, just ask and I'll get you the rest of those. Okay, so for an impromptu speech, yeah, there's some more process for that, but you don't need that. Okay, let's talk about this because this is really important. Nervousness tips. Okay, let's say you're really nervous about your speech. What can you do to help your nerves? Here's number one, pray about it. Say, Lord, help me to be calm in my body. Help me to be able to speak well. And the most importantly, help that they focus on you and the lesson and not me, right? Because it's not about me, okay? I want them to hear me, but I want them to know that it's from God, all right? Another thing is practice. Guess what? You're going to be really nervous if you didn't practice and you don't know your speech very well. But if you've practiced so much that you're like, I could do this while I'm asleep, okay? Then you can be a lot more confident. Okay, check out the room beforehand. It's always helpful to know what the room looks like that you're going to speak in. It calms you down, lets you know what's going to be going on. Even if you have the chance to stand up where you're actually going to stand giving the speech, that's good too. Because this is a part where it makes people really nervous. Sometimes for a lot of people, this is the most nervous part. From this seat to right here. That little space right there makes people really nervous. Once you're up here, you can calm down, you can be fine, but it's that walk up there and turning around and looking at everybody. But if you already have seen that and you see what it looks like to stand in that place, it can help you a lot, okay? Use eye contact to talk one-on-one with somebody. So like right at first, if you want to just pick a friendly face, like a grandma that's standing there like, oh, he's so handsome, okay? And if that makes you feel comfortable, okay, make a lot of eye contact with that person first. Okay? Another thing, watch mind games. Things going on that you tell yourself in your head. Don't let your mind say, Peyton, the audience has already made up its mind about this. They're not going to believe you. They don't want to be brave and courageous. I just realized I became Donald Trump all of a sudden. They do not want to be brave and courageous. They don't want it. It's very good. It really is. No. You want to be careful about that. Okay. Don't be intimidated by who's in the audience. That means think, oh no, Davis is in the audience and he's such a good speaker. What's he going to think about my speech? Okay. Don't be intimidated about who's in the audience. Okay. If you did well and you're speaking what God's already spoken from the Bible, then you don't have to worry about what anybody else thinks, okay? All right, don't require yourself to be perfect. Do you have to be perfect to do a good job? No, you don't. Okay? Think about your audience's needs and not yours. Okay? So if you're thinking the whole time about how well am I going to do? Are they going to like it? That's going to make you think about how nervous you are. But if you're thinking, you know what, this crowd probably has a lot of fears and things going on in their life, and they need to know ways that God is with them. So think about what your audience needs, and that takes your focus off of you and puts it on them, and you're thinking a lot less about your nerves, okay?
Their nerves.
All right. Now, here's one that really helps, and actually this is one that I personally think helps me more than anything else, is to visualize, which means to picture what it's like when it's going to be over. Your speech is done, you're sitting down, Davis is going, I approve. And you feel like you've done so well and everything's good. Because you know what? Every time you get down from a speech, you always feel like, I could do that again. right? It's like you're like, I did well. I can do that again. I can do that again. That wasn't so bad, right? So imagine that, okay? Picture yourself being done and everything going well, okay? Deep breaths. Everybody do it with me. Ready? In the nose. Smell the roses. Blow out the candle. Okay? Those can help you. Slow stretching. I would not suggest that you stand over at the side at lads to leaders like this. Okay? But go to the bathroom or something. Do some slow stretching. Now here's one that can really help, but there's a very important point about it. Chewing gum can really help you, but you have to spit it out before you get up there. Do not chew gum up there. But let me tell you why gum can calm you down. Because it tells your body and your nerves that you're eating something. Why does that matter? Because nerves, when you're nervous, they come from, remember we talked about adrenaline? Yeah. That hormone, that chemical in your body that makes your body go, we're about to go to war! Okay? But guess what? People who are at war, like, they're about to be killed, are not sitting down eating a meal. So your brain thinks, if he's eating, he must be fine. Okay? So if you're chewing gum, it can actually tell your brain to calm your body down. Okay? So, chew gum. I do that a lot. Chew gum before you get up there, and just make sure you spit it out before. All right. So here's your homework. Sir? All right. I'm going to give you this homework sheet. And you don't have to fill anything out on this, okay? But I tried to think, what is a way they can really just, if you want to, a way they can really, kind of boil it down to like, oh man, this is a lot of stuff. How do I do this? Okay? First of all, don't worry. This is just the first part of your homework, okay? Don't worry about getting it all organized, okay? Don't worry about organizing it right now. Forget about it. Don't worry about your conclusion or your intro for now. Don't worry about how you're going to start or how you're going to end. Okay? What are you guys doing?
I'm trying.
Liam, sit up.
I'm trying to.
Okay? Now, you guys have to organize and do your main points as much by yourself as possible, and then parents, before asking parents to do other stuff for you, okay? I want you to think of 2 or 3 main points. Okay, so you know what your speech is about, so what are your points going to be? What are you going to tell them? Like, if it's about be brave and courageous from this verse, why should they be brave and courageous? Or if it's about Jericho, what are your points? Is it going to be, Joshua was brave at Jericho. God can help you, just like he did. Okay, what are your points going to be? Think of 2 or 3. They can be, remember, informational, like telling people something, like, this is what happened with Joshua. You're just telling them something, okay? Or reasons why they should believe your main point of your whole thing, okay? Or reasons that support it. Reasons that help them understand what you're talking about, okay? Now, with each of those 2 or 3 main points, I want you to think of, so let's talk about point number 1, okay? Informational. Okay, or state the point. What is the point that you're making? Write it down. Here's the point I'm making. Now explain it to me a little bit. Okay? Explain it just a little bit. Write down a little bit of explanation underneath it. A little more. Tell me a little more. Okay, you ever do that in class when I'm teaching and I'm like, okay, what do you think we should do? Love other people. And I say, okay, tell me what you mean by that. That's what I'm talking about. Write down what you mean by that. Okay? And then I want you to think of some other scriptures that aren't just that scripture. Or not just scriptures. It could also be, what are some other people in the Bible that this reminds me of? Okay, that corresponds or supports that. What are some other people in the Bible this reminds me of? Okay, and then I want you to think of an illustration. It can be a story, a fact that's interesting, jokes, humor, again, be careful, etc. Okay, something that's an illustration for that. So for each of those 2 or 3 points, I want you to think of those 3 things. I want you to write out the point, write out what you mean a little more, find either some scriptures or other examples in the Bible that are just like that, and then some kind of illustration, some fact or some humor. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of what doing this looks like. Okay, and then the last thing is application, and that's where you're going to ask the question, so what? So what? I said all these things. Where do I see this happen in real life? Okay, so listen, here's an example. I did this with a point so you can see what this looks like, okay? So one of my points is Joshua could be strong and courageous because God was with him. Boys, hold your papers and sit down. Joshua could be strong and courageous because God was with him. Okay, so I'm going to write out some more about that. You should state the point, which I just did, read the scripture, and then explain the scripture. So let's say that your scripture is Jericho, all right? And your point about Jericho is that Joshua could be strong and courageous because God was with him. That's point 1. Then you should say that, then read the stuff about Jericho, and then explain what happened in that passage. Okay? Now, as we see what we just read, this is what happened with Joshua, okay? And now here's some other scriptures that have to do with that. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Hebrews 13:5 says, I don't have to fear. Okay? If God is for us, what do we have to fear? What can man do to me? Okay? And then here's a biblical example of another person that relates to this. God was with Moses. Think about the burning bush, right? Moses was like, how am I going to do this? Going to Pharaoh. And God was like, I'll be with you. And God was. And guess what? Moses was Joshua's mentor. He's the one who helped Joshua. So Joshua could be brave just like Moses was. Now here's an illustration that goes with this. I'm trying to think, okay, what's something that could help them understand? What's some kind of story that could help them understand what it's like to be brave, but God's going to be with you? Well, there's a story about Native Americans, Indians, who, when they become men, when they're little boys and it's time for them to become a man, they have to go out in the woods and they have to sit on a stump all night by themselves. And if they can make it through the night and be brave, then they're men. And guess what? They have all these sounds in the middle of the night and they're so scared and they make it through. And guess what they find out in the morning? That their dads actually sit far off and watch them from afar. They don't know their dad is there, but he is. Okay? He's there the whole time. And that's kind of like God, right? We may be going through something really hard and we think, oh, I'm all alone in this, but God's always there with us. Okay? All right, so that story is something that can help us understand. And remember, when we talked about emotion, that story makes us feel, right? It makes us feel what it would have been like to be the boy, what it's like to know about our dads being there for us, and God being just like that, okay? So then we ask the question, so what? Mr. Jeremy says all of this stuff, so what? Okay, what does that mean? So, and the other question was, where does this relate in real life? So what are we talking about? Being afraid. So I sat and I thought, we're being afraid of stuff and God is with us. What kinds of times are people afraid? And so I wrote down, what about losing their job? Sometimes people are afraid of that. Sometimes people are afraid of their physical safety, like they're going to get sick. Sometimes people are afraid of death. Sometimes people are afraid of being made fun of or being rejected, which means being told they can't do something or be a part of something. Okay, but God promises to be with us and work all things for good, and we can be brave with all those things. Okay, so you could sit down and think of a list of all these things that people can sometimes be afraid of. And what you're going to do with your point is if you'll do this, if you'll take your point and you'll do these 4 things I said to do, you can walk right through that like it's a speech. You can say, Joshua could be strong and courageous because God was with him. Let's look at Jericho. And then you read the passage and you say, this is what happened there. Now listen, God also says in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. God was also with Moses, remember? And Moses at the burning bush, and Moses was Joshua's mentor. Now, there's this story about Native American boys, and then you tell that story and you say, just like in that story, God will be with us. Now maybe you have felt like you're going to lose your job, or you were going to get sick, or you were going to die, or you're going to be made fun of, but God promises to be with us. See, I literally just read all of those things that were answers to my questions, and it sounded like I was giving a speech, because that's what it is. Okay? All right, so that's what I want you to do. All right? I want you've got your homework, you're going to think of 2 or 3 points about whatever your topic was. You could do a lot of it yourself, but then ask your parents to help. And with each of those points, I want you to ask those 4 basic things. Write out, what is the point? Explain it to me a little bit. Where are some other scriptures or biblical or examples of other people that remind me of this? What's a story or a joke or something that reminds me of this? And then where do I see this happening in real life? So if I'm talking about fears, let's practice this one because I feel like this one may be a little more difficult for you. I think we've only got, how much time do we got? Like none probably? Okay, we're out of time. That's the preacher that went too far over, okay? Let me just help you with this. Anybody can feel free to go anytime you want to, but I just want, hey, not you in the front. I meant the adult who can actually go. Everybody just got up to leave. Your parents can help you with the application thing. Okay? So how does it relate to real life? Where do I actually see this happen in my life and other people's? If you're talking about being afraid, what are some things people are afraid of? If you're talking about things that make us, how God helps us to be happy in our lives. Well, what are some ways that I actually see that happen? Okay? So what are ways you see this? Whoa, you looked like you were really short there. Okay. All right, y'all. Any questions for me?
Nope.
All right, then get out of here.